and welcome you all to the Bold Story Press publishing webinar. My name is Emily Barrosse, and I'm the founder of Bold Story Press. I've been in publishing really my whole career since I graduated from college. So that, in fact, is many more years now than 35 years of industry experience. I started out as an editorial assistant, making $10,000 a year in New York City. And I worked my way up through the industry. When I started out, publishing was very much used an apprenticeship model to train young people coming into the industry. And so I started out as an assistant, and then I became a sales rep, because if you wanted to one day run the company, everyone had to have sales experience. They required us to go out into the field so that we understood how people bought books, why they bought books, and what made a best-selling book. So I was an editorial assistant, a sales rep, a marketing manager, an editor, an acquisitions editor. And then as I worked my way up, I became a publisher and eventually vice president, editor-in-chief of a division of McGraw Hill in New York. During that time, I signed hundreds of books, published many best-selling books, and published my share of flops as well. Of course, publishing today is very different than it was when I was starting out. When I was starting out, we worked on these typewriters. There were no computers, no PCs. I don't even think mainframes maybe mainframes were up and running, but we weren't aware of them. It was a smaller industry. There were more publishing houses at that time, because there were small publishers and medium-sized publishers, as well as the larger publishers in trade publishing. My apologies for the dog bark in the background. The industry became smaller in the sense of the number of players over the number of years that I was working in it. The large publishers ate up the smaller publishers. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a minute, put you on mute and yell at the dog. Hold on one sec. My apologies. One of the downsides of working from home. So during that time, we saw the big publishers get bigger, and the medium-sized publishers either become big or disappear, and the small publishers, for the most part, disappeared. And the reason for the change was largely it was digital books. It was the appearance of Amazon on the scene, digital book sales, and ebooks. And because of Amazon, we saw chain bookstores completely disappear, with the exception of Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble is the only survivor of bookstore chains. And many more independent bookstores sprang up and went out of business. And there are a handful of successful and remaining independent bookstores out there. Amazon, of course, has had a huge impact on the publishing industry. If you are someone who wants to write and publish a book, if that's been a goal for you for many years, I think it's important to think about what your motivations are, why you want to write and publish that book. I've seen authors with the following motivations, and some of them have been very successful and some of them have not. But these tend to be the motivations I've run into in my years of publishing. The author is passionate about their topic, and they want to share that passion and even infuse that passion into others. That happens most frequently with nonfiction topics. It happens frequently in education, but the author wants to write about their topic because they love their area of research or their area of work. Some authors talk about having a story inside that they need to get out. That has happened more frequently with fiction writing. Some authors describe that as having a pretty well-formed idea in their mind, and they need to get that out and flesh it out. And occasionally I've run into authors who've talked about that experience as really channeling a fully formed book, where they are just writing and it's all coming out fully formed at the sentence level. Some authors write to make money, though there are fewer of those authors today because it's just become more challenging given the numbers of new books being published. Some authors write to establish themselves as an authority in their field. And some entrepreneurs will say that writing a book, authoring a book is a necessity if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, that it's almost like having a business card as an entrepreneur. You must have one. And then some authors write to leave a legacy. And we see more and more memoirs being written today where the author is interested in sharing the family history, sharing their own story, and putting that out into the world as a lasting legacy to be read and understood after they're gone. It's also important to think about for whom you are writing your book, and thinking through who your target reader is and your target market is going to help you in the process of writing, of creating the content. So you need to think about who will want your book, who will pay for your book, what do you know about them, and how are you going to reach them? I think it's also important to consider that if you are to become the published author you want to become, do you need to change? Do you need to make any changes either to your day-to-day routine or the way you think about creating content and sharing it? I love this quote. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. That has certainly been my experience in life. And so if you are someone who has been saying for many years, someday I'm going to publish my book, but you are not changing anything in your day-to-day routine or changing behaviors, you may not make that goal. I also love this quote, and particularly as it pertains to women writers. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. And that's a quote from Marianne Williamson. And I share that because I know I have struggled at times with this issue, particularly when it comes to writing and publishing, because when you write and put your content, your writing out into the world, you are exposing yourself, to the criticism of others. And it takes courage and some internal strength to do that. But it's so important that you do, if for no other reason than to model for other women writers, and especially young women writers coming, that it can be done, and it can be done successfully, and it can be done in a way that is a joy, that it creates the feeling of accomplishment and the sense of having shared something about your message that you want to share with the world. I'm going to talk about the 5 basic phases of publishing, a quick overview to give you an understanding of what this process looks like from the beginning of the process when you are writing to through the process of editing, design, getting your book made in the production process, and then launching and promoting your book once it's published and in the market. When it comes to writing, there are different writing styles. There is no one writing style that will guarantee success. Many writers are organized process people. They start with an outline of their book, and then they'll go back in and add A heads to that outline and B heads and C heads, really fleshing out the organization of each chapter and the detail and the plan for the content for each chapter. And then as they continue through the process of writing and creating, they're putting in more detail, more content, and more prose, and fleshing out their book until it's final. Another opposite style of writing, but a style that many people employ, and including myself, is called, writers who write this way are called pantsers. And that's because we are more inclined to fly by the seat of our pants, meaning that for me, my process when writing is to sit down at the blank page and just download my brain of all of my ideas about the topic, all of the content that I want to include, questions that I have that I need to further research, and just download all of that onto the page until we have a big mass of writing, and then we start to work our way through that, winnowing out the content that we don't want to keep, and giving the work, giving the content shape, and continuing to revise and edit until we get it into the shape that we want. Almost every form of writing that I'm aware of requires some form of research. Certainly with nonfiction writing, you will be doing a good deal of research, but even with fiction, if you are setting your story if it's a historical story, of course, you'll be doing research about the time. If you're setting your story or any part of your story in another part of the country, it's important that you get your facts right, because readers can be forgiving of mistakes, but most readers will not forgive multiple factual mistakes. You can make a mistake, in fact, once, maybe twice, but if you continue to make factual mistakes that your readers recognize, they're going to give up on your writing and put the book down. Book coaches are an option today if you are a writer. They did not exist when I started out in publishing. I never heard of a book coach probably until the last 6 years or so. I'm sure they've existed longer, but that's when they came to my attention. I've seen two types of book coaches out there. One is an experienced editor, often a developmental editor, who can not only be your accountability partner and help you with your planning and your scheduling and your goal setting, but also give you feedback on the content, and both from a macro sense of whether or not you're achieving your goals, whether or not your plot makes sense and your character development, etc. And then at a micro sense, by reading sentences and giving you feedback at that sentence level. And then finally, if you want to write a book, if you want to publish a book, a story, but you don't have the skill set to write that book yourself, and you're not interested in learning or developing that skill set, then you can hire a ghostwriter to write your book. And there are many out there. There are good ones out there, but of course, ghostwriting a book is expensive. If you want to write a book, I recommend that you write every day. There are many good writing books out there that you can read. I like Stephen King's book on writing, and he talks about how when he started out, he sat down at his computer in his office every day at the same time for the same period of time. And he believes over time that he trained his muse to show up every morning at 8 a.m. when he sat down and opened that computer. Most writing teachers and instructors will tell you that the best way to write a body of work is to set daily goals for yourself and meet those. And sometimes writers set a time limit or a time goal that they will write from 8 a.m. until 11 a.m. every day. And no matter what, for those 3 hours, all they're doing is writing. And if they can't think of what to say, then they just keep writing, including I can't think of what to say until that time is up. They don't do editing during that time. They're not doing research during that time. They are writing. And some writers set a word goal. And so they will say, I'm going to write 1,000 words this morning, and I won't stop until I reach 1,000 words. So I've seen both ways of self-motivating and setting goals work. You will learn to self-edit as you write. You have to, because none of us writes perfectly the first time we put it on the page. And you will want to seek reviews from objective sources. If you are only sharing your writing with loved ones and good friends, you are not going to get objective feedback, because you may get some, but people who love us want to support us and encourage us and want to talk about what we're doing well. And they're less likely to spend time on really objective feedback that tells you where you are going astray and how you need to make changes to the content. And so it's important that you have some way to get feedback, maybe from other writers in a writing group where you share beta chapters with each other, maybe with a book coach or possibly with an editor, so you can get objective feedback as you're creating. And then finally, if you want to be a writer, a successful writer, I can't stress enough the importance of reading. You should be reading all of the time. And if your goal is to write a memoir, you should be reading memoirs, the best-selling memoirs out there, to see examples of all of the different ways that you can create your content and share it. With editing, there are 3 basic kinds of editing. Developmental editing, I mentioned earlier, is the most intensive, the most skilled in many ways, and of course, the most expensive. Developmental editors will look at your work from 1,000 feet up in the air. They will be looking at organizational issues. They will be looking at timing and tension. Are you creating a sense of tension such that your reader stays engaged and wants to turn the page? They look at character development and dialogue, and they're giving you feedback both from a macro sense and a micro sense on a line-by-line sense. And so good developmental editors will read your book, give you a feedback in the form of a global report that talks about the larger issues that need to be addressed, as well as editing the manuscript on a line-by-line basis and giving you that detailed feedback on a line-by-line basis. Copy editing does some of that, and a good copy editor can comment on macro issues, but copy editors tend to be more focused on the micro issues. They're looking at, of course, for typos and grammatical errors. They're making sure that your manuscript meets a style manual. Every publishing house follows some style manual. At Bold Story Press, we follow the Chicago Manual of Style. And so, but a good copy editor is also going to comment on issues with characters and dialogue, et cetera, as well as content in nonfiction writing, content that doesn't make sense as explained or needs more examples or anecdotes to fully help your reader understand your points. And then proofreading should happen on every manuscript, even if it's had copy editing and developmental editing. And proofreading happens usually after the manuscript has been typeset. So you're now in pages or galleys, and a proofreader is reading for any typos or grammar errors that the copy editor missed, but they're also reading for any errors that the compositor may have introduced. And that happens frequently, where the compositor may accidentally introduce a space where it doesn't belong, or accidentally cut off the last word in a sentence or the last letter of a last word in a sentence. Book design is the next step in the process after the manuscript is considered final and the editors have signed off. With book design, most of my authors love this part of the process. You sit down with the designer and the editor, and we talk through what the genre is for the book, what the look and feel is that the author and the editor want to communicate with the book, what the goals are for the reader, what you want your readers to take away. We ask our authors to bring samples of covers that they love to these meetings and covers that they hate to these meetings, to give our designers as much information and as much detail as they possibly can, so that the designers can go off and create a design both for the cover and for the interior of the book, because every book needs a design. Even if it's just a black and white book with no photos, you still have to choose the fonts that you'll be using. For the prose, you still need chapter openers and part openers, and they're designed by a designer. And then, of course, if you do have art, photos or illustrations, your designer will decide where that art is placed in the book and how that art is treated in the book to maximize the book's success. Production is the process that starts when the manuscript is final. It includes all of the steps needed to take that final manuscript to a published bound book. And so in the production process, you are choosing the trim size of your book. Will it be 5x8 or 6x9 or 8x10? What kind of binding you'll be using? Are you doing a paperback book? Are you doing a hardbound book with a cloth exterior and a jacket? If you need a lay flat binding, if your book is a cookbook or some other kind of instructional book, you may want a lay flat binding that could be spiral binding, but even glued bindings now have a lay flat option, so that the book will lay flat and the pages won't curl up. You'll have to choose your paper color and the weight of that paper. Will it be 50-pound white paper or 70-pound cream paper? And to some extent, those decisions are driven by the market. Markets tend to stick to a trim size and a paper color. And so you'll need to be educated about that. Metadata research is critical to a book's success, and metadata is about keywords, of course, but it's much more complicated than just coming up with keywords. And getting the metadata right is very important. So you'll be doing research on the best-selling books in your genre and in your market. You will go in on Amazon and actually read the reviews left by readers of your competitors' books, and you'll be looking for the words those readers use to describe those books, because those are keywords that you want to use in your own metadata. There are many details and facets of metadata research, and it's the metadata that will help your book to be found in an Amazon search or a Google search. And in a market where more than 2 million books are being published every year now, it's very important that you get that metadata as specific and as right as you possibly can. In the production process, also, you'll be assigning your ISBNs. Every book and every format of your book will need its own ISBN. So if you're doing a paperback and a hardback and an ebook and an audiobook, you'll need 4 ISBNs. You'll need to register your copyright with the Library of Congress and the Copyright Office. And if you are doing ebooks and audiobooks, you'll need to learn about the process in creating those formats and how to create those final files that can be then shared with your distributor. A lot of decisions, a lot of work goes into this part of the process. So you get through this part of the process, you have a bound book, you have your pub date, and so now it's time to think about how you're going to sell and promote this book. Because of the sheer numbers of books being published today, it's more important than ever that you have a plan for getting your book out there. And so we recommend, at Bold Story Press, we recommend that you create a book launch team. That is a team of people who are often friends and family, and anyone in your network who will share the word about your book with their networks. The more other networks you can tap into, the larger your reach. And so you create a book launch team of people who are going to help you in this process on social media and in other ways to get the word out. If you believe that your book has real sales potential, you may hire a book publicist. And a book publicist is the person who may have relationships at the New York Times Book Review, or may know someone at the Today Show who can get you on for an interview. Book publicists are expensive, and they require a 3-month minimum agreement with their authors, 3 to 6 months. And hiring a publicist can sometimes be a very helpful thing to do for your book, and sometimes you may not get your money's worth. You may have been just as well off to have created your own marketing strategy and promotion plan and implemented it. You will want to design a marketing strategy, a step-by-step strategy with dates, and create a marketing calendar and you're sharing all of this with your book launch team. And reviews, getting reviews of your book are critical to the success of your book. Getting reviews on Amazon will push you up in the Amazon algorithms and get you more and more attention. So it's very important that you get book reviews on Amazon and on Goodreads. And getting reviews in the review sites, the critical review sites like Publishers Weekly or Kirkus, will also help you get the word out and drive success of your book. I'm going to say a few words just to explain what the different types of publishers are so that you have a better understanding of what your options are when you're ready to publish. Most authors want to be published by a traditional publisher. There are 5 of them, maybe 4 now. And the only way to get to a traditional publisher is through an agent. When I was starting out as an editorial assistant, a friend of mine who sat a couple of desks away, when it was time for us to move up to the next job, she went to the trade side of the business, and I was in the education side and stayed there for a while. And my friend worked her way up to the role of editor-in-chief of the children and young adult list at HarperCollins before she retired. And she told me that it was probably 35 years ago when the number of unsolicited manuscripts the publishers were receiving had reached the point of 25,000 manuscripts a year. And they simply could not keep up with the volume. They could not read all of those proposals and chapters and keep up. And so they decided at that point that they needed a gatekeeper in between themselves and the writing public. And it was at that point that they decided and told the publishing world that in order to have a book considered for publication by them, you must come through an agent. All of the other trade publishers quickly followed suit because they all had the same problem. And from that day forward, writers who want to be considered by a traditional publisher can only do so if they secure an agent first. And now it's as difficult as it once was to get an agent as it once was to get a traditional publisher and acquisitions editor look at your materials. The business model for traditional publishing has generally been historically, and some of this information may be a little bit old, that the writer receives some kind of advance, usually for a new author who has not published before. The advance will be in the $5,000 to $15,000 range. An advance is not a gift, it is an interest-free loan. And that advance is recovered by the publisher before you begin to see royalties from sales of your book. The publisher then pays for editorial, they pay for design, they pay for many of the expenses. And once the advance has been recovered, the traditional publisher will give you a royalty on net sales. That royalty is usually in the 8 to 12% range, and it's often 10%. And so with a $5,000 advance and no money up front given, and a 10% royalty, that's what a traditional publishing contract looks like. In the attempted merger last year or 2 years ago, a lot of information came out when the CEOs were testifying before Congress. And some of the interesting information that came out was the amount of money that traditional publishers spend on marketing. And the industry and an awful lot of people were shocked to hear that in many cases, it's less than 2% of their total budget, which is a really small number. And so when you consider that it is the best-selling books, those repeat books from successful authors, that next book in a series, etc., that gets the bulk of that marketing budget, it is the unknown for the unknown authors or the first-time authors. Often what happens is the marketing staff will throw the books into the deep end of the pool and see which books start to come up, see which books start to generate some sales on their own. And then once they see that the book is selling some without any marketing dollars from the publisher, they may invest some money in marketing that book. And so if you are a new author, counting on a robust marketing campaign from a traditional publisher is unrealistic. With self-publishing, you don't pay anything except for your own expenses in publishing the book. You will go on to Google or the internet and educate yourself about the self-publishing process. There's tons of content out there, and you can educate yourself and figure out how to do it on your own. It's a little trickier to find good editors and good designers because there's so many people out there who say they're good editors, and it's difficult for most authors to figure out who the good ones are and who the not so good ones are. But you will hire your own editors and hire your own designers and make all of those decisions in the production process yourself. You'll pay for your own marketing and promotion. And when the book publishes, you receive all of the royalties that come in. Hybrid publishers, and Bold Story Press is a hybrid publisher. It are publishers that have a foot in both worlds, in the sense that at Bold Story Press, we publish a curated list. We do not publish every title that comes into our publishing house. That would make us a vanity publisher. We are not a vanity publisher. We reject about 60% of the manuscripts that we see, sometimes even higher, and work with authors on the other percentage to help them get their manuscripts to the point where they're of the quality that we can publish. We do ask our authors to share in the risk by investing also in the process. So we charge them a flat fee up front that covers much of the editorial and design costs. And then when the book publishes, instead of receiving a 10% royalty for book sales, the author receives a 60% royalty on print sales and a 70% royalty on ebook sales. And then the final category isn't a publisher, really. Editorial service providers are what vanity presses are. They are companies that will, if you have got the money, they'll publish your book. They provide services, and you'll get mixed results from working with an editorial service provider because they have huge stables of freelance editors and designers, and the quality of those people vary. And so you won't really know what you're getting until you're in the process. At many hybrid publishers, Bold Story Press particularly, all of our designers, all of our editors, all of our production people have at least 20 years of experience in trade publishing. We all, were raised in traditional publishing, and frankly, you would never work with people as experienced as our team if you were to be signed by a traditional publisher, because the first-time authors in traditional publishing are assigned the people with less experience at the traditional publisher. So those are your options and your trade-offs in making decisions about publishing. I hope that explanation is helpful to you. Why would you choose hybrid publishing? Because you want the brand to mean something. Oh, I'm sorry. I have just this slide and one more slide, and we're done, and I'm going to stop it here because it's done. So that is my presentation. I hope you found that helpful. And I am happy to answer any questions that you have about the process. And I'm going to put myself on mute and let you raise your hand or ask any questions you'd like.
So for those of you who put some questions in the chat, just feel free to raise your hand and go ahead and ask Emily directly.
Yes, Spencer. Oh, I'm sorry, Shaheen. Shaheen, you go first.
Okay, thanks. Excellent presentation, very, very helpful. Almost everything that you said would probably be helpful for me, but I'm a poet. And I've published one book and I'm having trouble finding a reasonable publisher for my second. Do you have any specific advice for the second book, which I am finding more difficult than the first book?
So did you say that you self-published the first book?
No, a friend of mine recommended it to his publisher, who happened to be in Bulgaria. So he published it in Bulgaria. The book came out all right, but they didn't publicize it very much in the United States. So I don't want to use them again. I'd rather find an American publisher.
And what kind of book have you written?
It's a poetry book. I'm a poet. That's all I write.
So I'm not sure I'm clear on your question. Are you asking how to find a poetry publisher?
Well, are there specific advice for poets? For example, the one thing I've heard from many people is that poetry books actually never get agents because they never make money. So there are other ways of finding publishers that would be suitable for poetry. And I'm wondering, does Bold Story publish any poetry books? Do you know of other publishers that publish good poetry books?
So we don't, Shaheen, and the reason we don't is because, frankly, we don't know how to edit poetry books. In fact, we don't want to edit poetry books, right? And so it's more difficult to maintain, any kind of quality control for poetry. It is also true that poetry books don't sell very well. And so many publishers they shy away from poetry books. So I would recommend that you do some research on publishers that specialize in poetry and publish with a poetry publisher who really is expert in that area.
Thank you. Your comments were very helpful to me in any case, though. Thanks.
Good. I'm glad. I have a puppy up for adoption if anybody wants one. Spencer.
Hi, thanks. This was really terrific and very helpful and informative. May I ask about Bold Story Press? So what publicity do you do for your authors, and have you had any bestsellers? Are you able to get the books into, small independent bookstores as well as good placement on Amazon?
So Bold Story Press, we started 3 years ago, and our 3-year anniversary actually is tomorrow. And so during that time, we've signed 35 books and we've published 25 of them. And so it's still early days for us. We haven't had any books on the New York Times bestseller list, though that is a goal. But we have had books chosen for the Kirkus Book of the Year list. We had a title that was chosen last year. We've had starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly and some award winners. And in terms of what we do for marketing, we do publish and promote books on our own social media platforms, of course, and we do on our own websites. And we are beginning to offer marketing services that are much more affordable than what a publicist would cost. We are a small press, and we like to work. We're very hands-on with our authors. We like to work as a team. And so we are helping authors develop the marketing strategy and implement the strategy, on a step-by-step basis. some of our titles are doing quite well on Amazon, and in part because of the reviews that they've been getting, which has a lot to do with the quality of the books, but it's also has a lot to do with the commitment of the author to getting those reviews, because it's hard, to get 50 reviews on Amazon. Even your best friends and family members, they say they'll write a review and put it up. They mean to write a review and put it up, but then they don't. And it makes a huge difference. And so it's the authors that have been tireless in driving that promotion that really have had success. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you so much.
Sure. Oh, Rudy said, and some people take forever to read the whole book. So I've been in publishing my whole life, and I have always hated it when a loved one or a good friend has come to me and said, will you read my manuscript and tell me what you think? And the reason for that is that the large majority of manuscripts out there aren't that good. And there's nothing worse than telling someone you love that their manuscript is not that good. So I've always hated being put on the spot for that. I think most people who are asked to write a review for authors feel some version of that. And so there are some strategies, to help. I think that, I think even asking someone to take the time to read your book is a big ask. So there are some different ways to frame that ask that will help you get more reviews. Lisa.
Yeah, so I was just, wondering what sort of things you guys look for when you're choosing whether or not to take on a new author or a new book.
Excellent question, Lisa. And the first and the biggest criteria is quality. We have also rejected some books because of the content. We don't, I started Bold Story Press 3 years ago because COVID had just really started. The world was in a terrible place politically. The climate was coming into the crisis, and I was pretty discouraged and thought, boy, if half of the decision makers in the world, in Congress, in corporate America, were women, and I'm drawing back on my college day feminist roots, I don't think we'd be in this mess. I think the world would be a better place if half of the decision makers were women. And so I thought, what can I do to have any impact on that or change that in any way? And I realized that I knew from my many years of publishing experience that there have been hurdles for women in the industry, certainly all the years that I worked in the industry, that there was a bias toward male authors, and helping more women publish their work, I feel strongly is an important and a worthy goal, and it will help women to own their power in many ways, but maybe even more importantly, to model for young women coming behind us how to own their power and step up into those roles of decision-making and authority. So Bold Story Press publishes women authors only, and that's our mission and our passion. We have started working with male authors too, men authors. We don't publish them under the Bold Story Press imprint. We do that in a different way, but our passion is helping women to get their stories out. So, Lisa, did that answer your question?
It did, and thank you so much for amplifying the voices of women.
Yeah, Lisa. A second Lisa.
Thank you for this webinar, really, really helpful. So I heard this sort of old urban myth years ago that you should snail mail yourself a copy of your manuscript before you, or as you're sending it out to publishers, so that no one sort of steals your ideas. Is that true? Should you do that to
No.
protect your? No, okay.
No, the truth is that if you are writing copyright 2023 on the bottom of your manuscripts, whenever you share it with anyone, you are legally covered within some time frame. I think it's like a year. You have a year to actually register it with the Copyright Office. So just by, writing it on your manuscript, you're covered.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and frankly, in all my years in publishing, I never saw any incidents of theft,
Mhm.
where someone stole. I saw plagiarism, but even that was unintentional plagiarism. That was accidental. So yeah, that's how you protect yourself, and I wouldn't worry too much about that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Exandra.
Hi, thank you for this seminar. My question is, what are some tips and things to avoid when seeking an agent, and what are some things that we should avoid when submitting a manuscript and going about this process?
Boy, another excellent question. Well, I would say two things to avoid when going through this process. Don't sit on your manuscript as you're refining it and revising it and polishing it for the 100th or 200th or 300th time because you've got a little perfectionism in you. Make a decision that it is good enough at the appropriate time and start sending it out. There are so many options for publishing. Even if you get feedback that it's not perfect yet and needs more work, you can do that work and submit it to other publishers, and in some cases resubmit to that original publisher. So I can't tell you how many authors I've seen out there who have good content, but their perfectionism is keeping them from sending it in, and having someone evaluate it and starting the process. So try to avoid that. At the same time, make sure it is your best, the best you can do, because I find it very difficult to get an editor to change their mind about a manuscript once they've seen it and seen things in it that they didn't like. So it's difficult to ask an author to resubmit and then ask that same editor to read it again and come up with a different and much better take on it. So make sure it is the best that you can do, in the moment, but don't sit on it. Don't sit on it for too long. As far as getting an agent, it's hard. You have to send your manuscript or send the query letter to a lot of agents. It is a volume game. You have to get it out there to lots and lots of them. I would recommend that you think about what you're saying in that first sentence, the hook, in your letter. They get thousands and thousands of submissions, and they are looking for reasons to put the next one on the rejection pile. So if you can say something in that first sentence that captures their interest, you have a better shot of success. I would recommend that you look at the books that you like and go to the acknowledgement section, see who their agents were, and reference those books when you write to an agent. At least the agent will see that you did some research, that you know which books they represented, and it will catch their attention. And other than that, good luck. I mean, it is a volume game. It takes time. Robert.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for this really interesting exposition. I have written, my son died in 1988 suddenly, and I wrote letters to him after he died, and I put them together, and it's a memoir. It's a grief book. I self-published it. And I've now done the recording in a studio to make an audiobook out of it. So I'm regarding that as kind of a reset. At the time it came out, I hired a publicist, and it's just, as you say, it's just really hard to get attention. People who have read it say it's really helpful or it's really interesting. It should be in a graduate course for psychologists. I've gotten all sorts of wonderful feedback. Do you have any suggestions? I thought Bold was just for women, but apparently you also talk with men.
Yeah. Well, Robert, I'm sorry for your loss, and I think that sounds like a beautiful tribute. We are in the process of publishing a book exactly like that. A widow who has been writing letters to her husband who died many years ago. We offer a one-on-one phone call for all of you who attended today with me. If you have questions that you want to ask, or if there's anything that you don't want to ask in front of the group, I'm happy to spend some time with you and give you advice. So Robert, why don't you take me up on that, and we can talk one-on-one, and I'll see if I can come up with any ideas for you. I'd be happy to.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
Is your phone number?
We'll send you an email after the webinar today, and I'll ask you to respond and tell us that you do want to schedule a call, and we'll set it up.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Melissa.
Hello, thank you. Yes, thank you for this very informative webinar. So I am a published author, traditionally published, and I have an agent. And I've been doing work in more of the trade children's space recently. And so I have some books under contract, which is exciting. But the amount of time that it is taking to get them out is a factor that's influencing me. Plus, as we know, didn't talk about this, but publishing also kind of decides things that they are interested in as an industry and not. So like right now, biographies in the children's book market are not a hot commodity right now. So I've been thinking about, and I saw yours because I am also a feminist, as you can see behind me, and actually published with McGraw Hill as well. But my books, the one that I have in particular, are feminist focused and women in history. So I've been having a conundrum. I've been looking into self-publishing, looking at what you have to say, and I'm having this sort of a little bit of an existential moment of like, am I going to be hurting my trade or the traditional publishing by doing hybrid or even self-publishing? And just wondering how you see that balance going, you know.
So what did you publish traditionally?
I've published several things. So traditionally been YA, so young adults, through Learner Publishing. Most recently, I've had a textbook that came out through McGraw Hill. And then in past, I've had other books, and I've also published academically, so through journals and stuff. So that's the other thing, is that I've never paid to have my work published.
Yeah.
Never paid anyone. I've always either been paid or it's been peer reviewed, right? So it's,
Yeah. No, I don't think publishing hybrid I certainly don't think publishing with a hybrid publisher would ever hurt you. I think that anything that gets, as long as it's a curated list, anything that gets your name out more is going to help drive sales of everything, right? If you self-published or published with a vanity press, the publishing world can be a little snooty, and especially about vanity publishing and self-publishing. And that could maybe hurt you a little bit. But I'm not sure. I mean, again, Melissa, I'd be happy to talk to you about this one-on-one. Depending on what you want to do, I'm not sure that it would stop me. So I think you just need to understand what the trade-offs are.
That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. And I'm just to say too, my agent is supportive of me going down this path. She sees
Oh.
the, yeah. So it's just, yeah. And yeah, I know. I talked to her first about it and she's, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have
So-
a background in publishing too. I've been on the other, like your side of the desk before. And
Oh,
that's what
okay.
she said. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a lot of work.
It is. It is. But it's great work. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one, but I don't know how to wave.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead, Hermine.
I'm a published photographer, and I wondered if you have any advice about that. I am a visual ethnographer. I travel around the world, live with local families for periods of time, and document through pictures and the captions what everyday life is like in different parts of the world. I had an agent, a photo agent, and she retired. And so I'm just wondering, because everybody I talk to and tell them about various things I've done, say, when are you going to publish a book? And I frankly never sat still long enough to really take it seriously. And of course, as I get older, I think learning about the world is a wonderful way to broaden your perspective, which we sadly need these days. So do you have any advice? Do you do any photo books that have had extensive content, not just photos?
We certainly have books that have photos. When we're in the process right now of evaluating a book with 4-color photos, and it would be the first time we're doing 4-color photography. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
And, the days when people bought coffee table books of beautiful pictures are gone.
Yeah,
And so, the unit costs on a trade book are usually somewhere between $5 and $7. On this 4-color book that we were considering, the unit costs were as high as $18. And so that's before you consider, all your other costs and your discounts, because Amazon, Ingram wants a 53% discount. And so it's very difficult to get a reasonable price, and the costs are so high. But Hermine, again, schedule the call, and I'd be happy to brainstorm with you a little bit. I think there are ways to share some of your photography online, and maybe even just through an ebook, with links to online that are a way to get your work out there. So, if I can help you, I will.
okay. For what it's worth, I have been plagiarized, big time. Showed up in a coffee table book with someone else's name on the pictures, just so you know, it does happen. It was in another country, and they said, well, the photographer who gave us the pictures said they were his. And I said, but they're copyrighted. And because there was a language issue, and if I went to court, I would have to, get an interpreter and a lawyer there and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, just for what it's worth, it happens.
Yeah.
And
Sorry to hear that.
yeah, well, this was a while ago, and it was a country that signed the copyright statement and everything else, but they didn't want to take any responsibility. So, the publisher didn't want to take any responsibility. So that took care of that. But anyway, because I have such an extensive photo collection, every photo has a story with it, and the stories illustrate things about life that I think is probably useful for people, for kids. But of course, I know the cost is extensive. So, there's a bunch of options there. Anyway, I will schedule a call. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It was a presentation.
Wonderful. Mariella, you're on mute.
Hi. My question has to do with finding artists. I've written a children's book that I'm a kids yoga teacher and family yoga teacher, and I've written a book, a board book, kind of like a real rhyming. I also do yoga classes for story time in the public libraries. So what I'm hoping to do is have that be one of the books that I read through, and we use body motions and poses to go with the book that I've written. But I'm having a really difficult time getting started and finding an artist. And I don't know if there's any kind of resource somewhere or anywhere you can direct me to find an artist. I know there's definitely websites where you can kind of just put your project out there and see what someone would pay to do that, like Thumbtack and Fiverr and things like that. But I really kind of already have an idea of how I want the book to be illustrated. And it could possibly be matched with photography. Hermione, we need to chat. Yeah, I guess that's just really my question right there. I'm not yet at the point where I'm ready to find a publisher, because I feel like I've written what I want. I know kind of how I want it to look. I just don't know where to go to even just start drafting, to kind of see and even get it out there, to have people look at it. People in my yoga space, in children's yoga instruction, I have several people that I'd love to kind of see what their thoughts are on the book. So that's my question. And thank you so much for this presentation. This has been great.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, there is a website that we like, and where we found a couple of illustrators that we really liked. There's also a children's book coach whom we love, actually, and she is an illustrator and an author. Her books were with HarperCollins, and I might recommend that you talk to her, you know, and even just pay her for I don't know what she would charge you, like $100 session where she gives you some advice, because she really understands, you know, obviously the art side as well as the content side. And I think she might be a really valuable resource for you to find the right illustrator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like there's so many children's books out there. But because it has a yoga spin, I kind of want to, that's my niche, I guess.
okay.
So yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I would be interested in the one-on-one call too, to be able to talk through that.
Okay.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Oh, what kind of dog were you adopting?
Oh,
We're looking.
I was kidding. I'm not going to put him up for adoption.
Oh, we're looking for a dog currently. So I was like, oh, put me on the list. So, okay.
Maybe I could loan him to you for my next.
Of course. That sounds fantastic. I'm a dog walker and I board dogs too. So let me know.
Oh, good to know. Thanks, Marianne. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, we will follow up today with an email, and you're welcome to schedule that call. Thank you all for coming, and I wish you success with your writing. I hope that you publish your work. I think that we need more good content in the world. There's a lot of bad content out there, so don't give up. And
agreed.
If we can help you, we'd like to. So I look forward to talking to those of you who would like to talk one-on-one, and I wish you all success. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.